presentation, and then there's going to be a Q&A session. And when someone raises their hand, we call on them, just ask a question. Just turn it on and hand them this. You can sing a song if you want. Okay. And then, so I'm going to give you this. And then,
How are you?
I think we'll just switch.
Did you want to come up here and remember days of yore?
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So you've got.
Well, we'll have a hearing because we're keeping the tax rate the same. And then, so did you have a question? Are you wondering something? Yeah. So this is the main. This is the meeting in here. But we'll have to break away where we like close one thing and open another, and then close it back and go back to this meeting. And that's for the Truth and Taxation public hearing, which is this one. And then, let's see. We've got, I think that is number, no, that's different. I think it is very first. I think it is. You don't need to put it down. You'll just stand here and sorry, I have a headache. I'm trying to push on different parts. So they'll just have you come to the pulpit and speak if you have something you want to say. And you'll just tell us who you are and where you live. Specifically, Larry, where do you live?
How are you? It was fun. We had a good time. We had a real length of a rainstorm. Cassie, are we ready to go? Are we okay? I don't see Jordan. I know he's here.
I was hiding
There you are. There you are. There you are. We declare that this business meeting of the Syracuse City Council, which involves a truth and taxation hearing, held August 13th, 2019 at 6 p.m. We're holding that in the City Council chambers in our municipal building. We welcome you here. On behalf of the staff and the City Council, I'm glad you're here. I've asked Dave if he would lead us in an invocation or a thought, and then Corinne if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this day, and we're grateful for the opportunity to come together as a City Council. We're grateful for the many blessings that have been given to our community and the opportunities to grow and progress and work together to achieve many wonderful things. We're grateful for the blessings of community and the things that we share, the things that we're able to build. We are grateful for the prosperity of this great city and the many challenges that we've been able to overcome. We pray this night that as a council we'll be guided by thy Spirit, that we'll be able to debate and resolve concerns with thy Spirit present, that we will be able to communicate properly with the public, that they will understand our thoughts and concerns as well. We pray that we will be able to leave this meeting feeling like we've accomplished many great tasks, and we say these things humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Will the audience please stand now for the appropriate salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dave and Corinne. Council, I would request the adoption of the agenda for this session.
moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Peterson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Bolduc. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Cassie, would you record that unanimous? We're at item 2, the consideration of a final budget for fiscal year 2019 through 2020. Currently, the city is working with an operational budget, and that budget is one that was approved in the June time frame to give us the opportunity to hold this hearing. By state statute, in order for us to hold the tax rate as it was last year, we need to assemble in a public hearing. Anytime we deal with the expenditure of money or the gathering of monies, it needs to meet with a public hearing. The statute is a little different in relationship to this hearing than it is other hearings, because this particular meeting, at the end of this meeting, we will adjourn and we'll go into a business meeting. But by state statute, this meeting, the only discussion items that can be discussed are related to that budget process and the holding of the tax rate. Now, maybe a little bit of information. I have asked Brody, our city manager, if he would come forward and give us all just a little brief sketch of the final budget for fiscal year 2019, where monies are coming from and where they're going and why the proposal to hold the tax rate. And then after he has finished with his presentation, I will open that up to the public for questions. It will not be part of the public hearing. You'll be able to dialogue back and forth with Brody and get questions that you have related to that budget on the table, and he will do his best to answer them. After we have finished that point, then we will go into a public hearing, and I'll have more to say about what will be accomplished and how that will happen during that public hearing. So Brody, could you give us a sketch of where we're going?
Pull this up here. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We all have parts of our jobs that we really don't enjoy, and standing up in front of the public and discussing why, a possible increase in taxes is possibly a good thing. It happens to be one of the things that is not the funnest part of my job, but I'll do my best here. Nobody enjoys paying taxes. And this is one of the reasons we have a hearing, so that we can hear from everybody and who's interested and who wants to lend their voice. But one thing that we are good at is being consumers. And so it is good that this city council has put a lot of thought into what people get for their money, what they get for their tax dollars. And so what we're going to present today, if the council does choose to hold the tax rate, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit. If they do choose to hold the tax rate, that'll be something that you'll be able to understand and understand why and what you'll get for that. Just by way of background, the city has multiple sources of revenue. Hopefully you can see that text there. Property tax is actually quite a small portion of our total revenue. It's about 16% of all revenue that the city obtains. The two biggest sources of revenue in the city are sales tax and charges for services that we provide. And that includes everything from building permits to park and rec programming, and other services, passport services that the city provides. And those two make up the lion's share of where the city gets its money. Property tax is probably, however, the most stable. It tends to fluctuate very little. and I'll explain a little bit why that is. So it is, while it's not a lot, it's stable. Sales tax is very volatile. Charges for services are very volatile. A lot of it depends on the economy. Okay. I'll take questions after this presentation, and we can go back if you have a question on one of the slides. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about how property tax actually works in Utah. We don't make the rules for property tax, but we do have to abide by them. And so the way it works in Utah, your property values, they go up, sometimes they go down, right? The way the legislature has written the law, the city gets the same amount of money every year, regardless of whether property taxes overall go up or down. So for example, if property values go up or down, if all property value goes up in the city, the tax rate actually automatically drops, so that the same amount of money is provided to the city. So as you see up here on the screen, in this example, say property values in Syracuse went up this last year, then the tax rate automatically goes down, and so that the city still receives the same amount of money. In this example, it's $1,000. Okay. Likewise, if property values in the city went down, the tax rate would automatically go up, and yet the city would still only get $1,000. So that's kind of how property tax works in Utah. There's a couple of issues with that, and this is why we talk about property tax increases or holding the rate so that the property tax rate doesn't go up, but we don't let it go down either. The concept of inflation, I think everybody understands. So if you can imagine, the city, if the city didn't grow, if there weren't any new homes, the city would get the same amount of money every year as time goes on. So in this example, let's say we got $1,000 from some properties in 2009. Well, if the council didn't adjust the rate in 2019, we would still be getting $1,000 from those same properties, which is fine. The problem with that is inflation. So in 2009, we could have purchased or provided $1,000 worth of goods and services to our residents. But in 2019, we could only provide $838 of goods and services to our residents. So by nature of because of inflation, the city's ability to actually provide services goes down unless the city addresses revenue. And specifically, tonight we're talking through property taxes. Compounding that is the fact that the city is growing. And with more residents, the city gets more demands for services. And so not only is inflation eroding our ability to purchase materials, things like everything from road asphalt to ambulances to police equipment and police vehicles. We're also getting the demand for more police officers, for more fire response, and so we're kind of getting squeezed on both ends. One from inflation and the other from just added demands because our city's growing. So before we get into here, does anybody know how much they pay the city in property taxes on their personal? Does anyone want to volunteer how much they pay the city in property taxes, roughly? Any guesses, or does anybody know? Ballpark figure, or maybe you don't want to reveal that. What's that? About $280. That's pretty close, I would say, for most people, and that, I'm sure that's accurate for your property. What people, a lot of people don't understand that their whole property tax doesn't go to the city. So in this chart, it's showing over 50%, about 61% of your property tax bill. So most people, their whole property tax bill is usually somewhere, you know, $1,500, you know, $1,300 or $2,000, $2,500. A lot of people erroneously think that that's all going to the city. It is not. The city's getting about 11% of that. The average home value in Syracuse right now is $331,000. On that property, that property is paying about $275. Okay, your property might be worth more, it might be worth less, so you would be paying a little bit more, a little bit less, but that's the amount of money provided per year by your residents. The other players in your property tax bill are the county, which accounts for about 13%, the library, which is about 2%, Weber Basin Water, which is about 1%, mosquito abatement, about 1%, North Davis Sewer District is about 6%, and then the county has their fee for collecting and distributing taxes and that administration, which is about another 1.5%. So, but the biggest share, it goes to the school district, okay? Okay, so tonight, what the council is having a hearing on is whether to hold the current tax rate, which they're not raising the tax rate, they are holding it and keeping it from going down. This is not a foregone conclusion that this is what the city council is going to do tonight. In our discussions with the budget, we've been working on the budget since last winter. And there really wasn't any strong discussion about raising taxes or holding the rate or lowering taxes based on the budget that we had available. Went through every department, every service that we provide. We looked at everything we possibly could to keep it economical, but yet provide you a quality service. And we felt like there are some things that we're just not going to fund because we don't have the money. But our council felt like it was worth having a hearing to consider holding the rate, and it would generate some more money in the budget. So here's the proposal, and then I'll explain how that might impact your property individually. So the proposal here is to keep the tax rate the way it is today. The current tax rate is 0.001512 of your property value. If they hold the rate the same, there would be approximately $162,000 in additional revenue because of increased property values. To the average residents, that equates to about $18.21 a year. Or most of us, not everybody, but a lot of people budget monthly, so it's easy to understand in monthly terms. That's $1.52 per month for the average residents. Okay, so that's the additional generation of revenue. Now, that is speaking in very broad terms. Your property value could have gone down, and I know there are properties in the city where that has happened. In that case, even with holding the rate, you would actually be paying less in taxes because your property value went down and the rate was held the same. So you would actually pay less in taxes even if they decide to hold the rate tonight. So how it impacts you personally, you need to look at your own property tax sheet and see what the valuation is done. And they lay that out for you from the county statement that they give you every year, and that has been provided through the mail. What we're speaking are in terms of just generalities. On average, property values have gone up across the city, and so therefore there's going to be more revenue. Okay. Okay, what are the residents going to get in return for that additional revenue. So we've discussed this in work sessions with the council, and the proposal here is first, $45,000 of that $162,000 would be to convert an existing part-time maintenance, park maintenance position into a full-time park maintenance position. Currently in today's labor market, it is difficult to hire and keep good part-time positions. A lot of times what we experience in these types of positions is you either get somebody who is a really good employee and is looking for full-time, and so we don't get to keep them very long and we're continually training them, or we get someone who maybe we wish would get a full-time job somewhere else because they're not a great employee. And that's the current labor market we're in. And if any of you own a business or hire or do any of that, you probably are seeing the same thing. So that's a conversion to full-time. Then the other $117,000 remaining would be needed to convert our police station into the city's emergency operations center. The south side of the police station is currently it's a training room, and the city strategically has decided that that building should be our primary emergency operations center. Well, with the West Davis Highway coming online in a matter of 3 years, that will bisect the city. Our current emergency operations center is at the fire station, which is on the west side of the highway. And now with the highway, we feel like that the primary emergency operations center should be on the east side of the highway, where it's easier to get communication, deliveries of goods and supplies needed in an emergency. What's in that 117? Well, the first thing is a generator for that building. This is a backup generator. If we were to have an earthquake or any kind of major, catastrophe and power were to go out, we would need a backup power situation. That generator, there is a generator over there, but it is inadequate. It can only power about half of the building. And so to upgrade that, we would switch out that generator, and that's $90,000, and we have a cost estimate on that already. In addition, what we would get with that is our plan is to actually take the old generator and hook it up to the city's primary well, water well, which does not have any backup power. And so that generator would hopefully power the well in an emergency. Another $55,000 for physical improvements to the building. That includes the electrical, some concrete work, flooring, and that sort of thing. So there's some actual physical improvements we need to make to the police station in order to make that happen. And then another $50,000 for all of the IT and audiovisual equipment. The Emergency Operations Center is the central decision-making place for managing an emergency in the city. And so we would need all that communication equipment to make that happen. So if you're doing the math, that actually adds up to $195,000, not $162,000. So we have saved money. About $78,000 would come from our existing capital fund. So that's kind of an example of what an emergency operations center looks like. That's a lot more fancy than what we would get, but it kind of gives you a flavor of what it's for. Okay. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, there are many things that the council is going to leave on the cutting room floor. There are needs that the city has that we're just not going to fund because there's not enough resources. One of them is our park maintenance facility. We currently have, this is a picture of our current park maintenance facility. It's located up at the cemetery. And this is the primary storage and maintenance facility for our entire park system. It is woefully inadequate. On a typical day, our park and rec employees have to play the equivalent of three-dimensional Tetris to get vehicles and mowers and equipment in and out of this building. And it wastes a lot of time, a lot of staff time, which is not good for the city. We are looking for ways to fund a new and larger facility, but in the current budget, that is not accounted for. West Davis Highway betterments. This is a picture of Fort Benning in Georgia. We would never have enough funds to make it look this good, but this kind of gives you a flavor of what it is. So when UDOT builds a highway, they will build it to a very basic standard. If you want your intersections and your interchanges to look nice, you, the city, have to come up with the additional funding to do that. Now, why would the city do that? Well, these types of improvements tend to hold property value. They show that this community takes pride in itself, and it kind of creates the feeling of this is a nice community, which supports your property values. And so it is seen as an investment. It's not a secret that a prominent furniture store in the city has broken ground in Layton. It is said that they will likely, but we don't really know, they could move over to Layton and out of the city. They are a major sales tax generator for the city, and so we do expect some stagnation in our sales tax revenue, which I mentioned earlier is one of our largest sources of revenue. As I mentioned before, with growth in the city, there's more demand for police officers. It costs over $100,000 per officer, including the vehicle, equipment, salary benefits. And so, as you can see, with an increase of only $162,000 in property tax, that really doesn't go very far in these needs. We are looking at issues regarding our average response time for fire and EMS in the city. We've done a study, and we know that there are areas of the city where our average response time is of concern. And as the city grows and as the highway comes and actually limits east-west travel due to traffic or just difficulty in crossing, the city thinks that there's a chance that we may need additional resources in fire and EMS. Again, that wouldn't be funded with this proposal. There are park improvements needed. We have aging park facilities that need addressed. There is needed park development. Our recreation programming is at capacity in a lot of areas. We simply do not have park room in our parks for our projected enrollment in recreation programming, to the point where we may actually have to limit the size of our programming and limit the number of children that can participate, which is something that we don't think that the community wants. And so we do need to develop more parkland. We do have land. We have acquired some parkland, but we do not have enough funding right now to actually build it. And then finally, while we've made a lot of progress in the last 10, 11 years in road paving, there's still a lot of progress to go. And so future consideration, property tax does support road paving. And so these are things that in future years this additional $162,000 would go to. It really doesn't solve any of the problem, any of these issues, but it contributes to it, and the city's going to do what do whatever it can to make it work. We've trimmed and tried to keep everything as efficient as we can. And so that is why this proposal is being considered. If you're wondering kind of how we stack up with other cities in the area, if you look at the property tax rate in North Davis County, this is how it stacks up in 2019. If you can't read the bottom, I'll just go across from left to right for you. On the left is West Point and then Clearfield. Those are the two in red. And then you have Syracuse, Sunset, Kaysville, Farmington, Clinton, and Layton. So in North Davis County, kind of our neighboring cities, those are the certified tax rates. Now the two cities in red, they do not have a fire department. And so they actually receive their fire service from North Davis Fire District, which has its own property tax. So if you include their property taxes rate, this is a more accurate picture of what their residents actually pay, even though the city rate is lower, but their residents actually pay more because they pay North Davis Fire District. Syracuse residents do not pay that. Other cities in the county that are considering a truth in taxation hearing and either holding the rate or raising their rate are Kaysville, Layton, South Weber, West Point, and the Davis School District. So tonight, after the hearing, the council will make a decision. There are a number of actions they can take. One is they can decide to let the rate go down. They could decide to let the rate go down a little bit, but not all the way. They could decide to hold the rate, but there's no consideration to actually raise the rate tonight. So with that, I'll open it up. Brittany is here. She's going to have a microphone so that we can catch it on the record. If there are any questions, she'll give you the microphone and you can ask a question and we'll try to get an answer for you. So I'll open that up if anybody has any questions. Got one over here.
State my name, my rank, and everything, or what?
Your name and city of residence.
Well, if I'm not in Syracuse, I shouldn't be here.
I would hope so, but you never know.
My name is Fred Perry with an A, not a E. And just got a few questions, and because I used to work for the government negotiating contracts, I get in the numbers. So on the tax, you're trying to maintain the same tax structure or the same rate. So if we have, so the state gives you, say, $100,000 for 100 houses. And the next year you have 150 houses. Do they still give you $100,000 because they say it's set? Or is that rate go up because the number of houses that have increased?
Oh yeah, so the rate is independent of the number of houses. So when more houses come online, those new houses pay additional tax money.
So they don't deduct it from you?
Correct.
So that, okay.
Yeah, so growth in houses does equate to growth in revenue.
So you have 162,000 or whatever that number was up there. Mm-hmm. What has been the growth in houses in Syracuse, say, for the last year?
So for over the last year, Syracuse City, we welcomed about one new household into the city per day on average, so about 360.
So how much did that increase your tax revenue then at that point?
Yeah, that'd be 360 times roughly 275, whatever that is.
Okay, but you still need the $160,000 more because the growth, I mean, I understand the growth, and at certain points you have to increase the police protection and the fire protection, but at what point that determines when it is. I mean, you don't just do one for one, but.
Correct.
Okay, your discussion on the east-west and the emergency preparedness. Is the emergency facilities adequate for Syracuse as it exists now if there was no highway coming through?
Are you asking in terms of the Emergency Operations Center?
Yes.
Or response time for fire and EMS?
I'm
Or
the
both.
center. I'm talking about the center right now
Okay,
because you want to move it from the fire station to the police station,
correct.
which I don't know why the fire station didn't beat up on the police station and say we don't want to give it away.
Yeah, they may have. They may have. Yeah,
Oh,
I just didn't say that in the
okay,
presentation.
that's fine.
No, so the is it adequate? Depends on the emergency. So
is the infrastructure adequate? Are they up to date on all the electronics they need to respond to an emergency if we were to have an earthquake right now? Or have we depleted ourselves and we need to upgrade that? When you sit there and you say, with the east-west, I don't buy that information. I mean, I don't buy off on that
That's
because
opinion.
the fact is that the,
Mr., I would ask you to hold that for the public hearing because now you're expressing opinion.
well,
I'd like
okay,
to-
I don't know.
I'd like you to ask questions of him and get answers, and we'll move into a public hearing where you can express opinion.
Okay, then I can really get you mad at me.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's the only number thing I have, so I'll get you mad at me later on.
okay, yeah, and I will say that as far as adequacy, in emergency management, you kind of learn that no matter what you do, you're never fully prepared for the emergency that actually comes. But what we do know is that up here where the police station is, it's closer to the community center, which is going to be our temporary shelter facility during an emergency, and it's closer to City Hall, which will be able to conduct administrative matters. It's within walking distance where, the fire station's kind of isolated. And so from a strategic standpoint, even without the highway, we think it's a better location, but with the highway, we feel that just makes it even more urgent, I guess.
Brody,
Yes.
the community center is also our volunteer operations center, so it would be much more conducive to be able to organize the volunteers that are going out there.
Right, so Councilmember Savage indicated that the community center is also our volunteer organization center, so coordinating between the EOC and volunteers can be done more efficiently from the police station, which is a good point. Okay, thank you, great questions. Are there any other questions? We have one over here, Brittany.
Brent Burgess, Syracuse. Is it, because of the nature of how difficult it is to get income for the city, is it the city's desire to perhaps increase the density of housing in order to get more income from property tax? Does that seem to be the way to do it?
So, an increase in density would, over time, create more houses. It would create more revenue, could also create more demand. So I don't know that that's a recipe for, gaining revenue over expenses. Whether it's the city's policy, they do have a general plan that they are working on and will probably adopt soon. That will set the stage for what kind of densities the city would allow and what looking for in the future. So I would say, I don't know that I don't think that's a strategy, but the density question is more a factor of what kind of community do we want to be. And that's laid out in the general plan, which is in a draft stage right now, and the council will be discussing that at the next meeting.
Okay, so if if
That's my
there
understanding.
are,
I'm sorry. Okay, yep. Is that correct? Is that in the next meeting, or
No.
was that adopted? No.
In fact, I'm going to rule that any discussions of density are not pertinent to this year's budget. And I'd like to have a stop dialogue on that, because that is not why we're here. We're not here to debate density. What we're here tonight to do is to approve or disapprove or modify the current tax rate.
okay, then let me just follow up. When can those citizens who are concerned about housing density have their time to come and express their opinion?
Yeah, so at the beginning of, so this is a dedicated hearing. The state requires, this is the only issue that can be on this agenda. After they make after they have this hearing and make this decision, this hearing will close, and then we will open a regular business session right after this, so you can stay here. And there will be time for public comment where you can bring up any issue that you would like.
All right, thank you.
And that would be a good time for that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Mayor, I think that's
Okay,
everything.
thank you, Brody. I appreciate that. You've gone to a lot of work, and it was very, very clear to me. The City Council has adopted Robert's Rules of Order for the conducting of public meetings. I would like to maybe just give us a little sketch of his life so you understand what the frustration is in a public meeting, to be able to dialogue in a way that is meaningful. Henry M. Roberts was born in 1837. He graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 1857 at the age of 20. And he formed what would later become the Corps of Engineers, which governs what we can do in the city in places where there are wetlands. We have to have approval of this group of people. And therefore, you know that Roberts' background was in civil engineering. It wasn't in politics, it wasn't in meeting conducting, it was in civil engineering. As strange as that may be, in 1859, a year before the Civil War began, there was an uprising in British Columbia, and a boundary dispute existed between a colony in Canada and the U.S. boundary. And so Henry M. Roberts was sent to what is called the Pig War. That war began because somebody killed the commissioner in the Canadian colony that was there, his pig. And so Roberts was sent there as a second lieutenant to ease that tension. He went back to Washington, in the Washington area, and eventually settled in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And he was a member of the First Baptist Church in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and he was asked to conduct a meeting, a political meeting in that area. And he got so confused and the situation scared the heck out of him. And so he refused to do any conducting of meetings anymore without learning a little bit more about parliamentary procedure. And so he wrote a book called Robert's Rules of Order, and we subscribed to that. Now, I'm going to open a public hearing in just a minute, and what we're going to ask you to do is come forward. The purpose of this hearing is to learn the opinions of the members of the city that are here tonight. It will be conducted in this manner. We will allow up to 3 minutes of discussion at that dais, and you may address the council with your concerns. At this point, the council will not be allowed to make any comment. They will make some notes. And then when the public hearing is finished, when you are completed, then the council may respond to the opinions that have been expressed here, and then they will then among themselves make a decision as to what they're going to do. Brody laid that out for us. They will do so by resolution. They will lay that out whether they reduce the rate, reduce it a little, hold the rate, and again, raising the rate is not on the table. That is not an issue here tonight. So having explained that, the rules of operation, you may come forward if you'll state your name and place of residence. We will give you up to 3 minutes to discuss your opinion with the council. Cassie, would you be the timer? Would you time for us? And again, the only thing we are discussing is raising the rate. No other item will be allowed at the discussion at this point. And as Brody mentioned, when we reconvene in the next session, there will be a time for public comment. So if you would like to comment, I declare the public hearing open for comment.
I'm Bonnie Burgess, Syracuse. Apologize about my attire. I've been had a crazy day. But thank you, Mayor, for opening this up, and council members for the opportunity to listen to us and express our concerns. In our recent city newsletter, there was an item in there about changes in fees for water and other things, and I am confused as how that ties in fees versus taxes. Can the city manager, I know that you guys can't answer, you're just taking notes, but can the city manager or the attorney answer that for me, please? What is the breakdown between the fees increased with the taxes?
Brody, the appropriate time probably would have been when you were still standing there, but would you answer her question?
Let me clarify, see if I understand the question. Are you saying, could you repeat the question so that I can understand?
So my question is that we just had a raise in fees.
Are you talking about utility fees?
Right,
Okay.
right. The water and the
Mhm,
sewer
mhm,
and there was one for parks management and
mhm.
so our taxes cover city maintenance and all that other stuff. Why are the fees going up? And what the public hearing and the comment on that, just what is the connection? How can the fees go up and how does that affect taxes or?
Sure. Okay, so so utility fees, the money that comes in from utility fees goes into dedicated funds. So just to give an example, the money you pay on your water fee, it can be used for a police car or to purchase, things that come out of our general fund. It can only be used for water infrastructure. Now there are provisions under state law where the city can make transfers, but it involves a public hearing and that sort of thing, and it is extremely rare that Syracuse City does that. I know of maybe once in the last maybe 10 years. So generally speaking, so that money is dedicated for each utility. The increases that just happened in the utility fees, we had an increase in water. And the reason for that increase was one, the city has to purchase water from Weber Basin in order to provide it to the residents. That's culinary water. Weber Basin increased their rates for water. And so in order to actually cover the cost of that increase, we had to pass that along to the consumer, which is us, the residents, right? That was for part of it. The other part of that fee increase was to hire an additional maintenance worker to maintain the culinary water lines in the city. As you know, with each development, there's more miles of water lines that we have to maintain and that sort of thing. There was an increase in secondary water for the exact same reason. We hired one person to do water maintenance for secondary water, and Weber Basin increased their fees for our secondary water. There was an increase in garbage. That again was a pass-through. So that wasn't due to any increase from the city expenses. That was due to a bond that Wasatch Front Integrated passed for a recycling facility that we will then be able to recycle by just throwing our stuff in the trash can, and they pull apart all the recyclables and that sort of thing out of our trash. So there was a bond associated. They have to pay for the new building to do that. It costs an additional $2 per can for Syracuse, and so we had to pass that along. And then, as you mentioned, there was park maintenance, an increase in park maintenance. With the additional parks coming online, including the Syracuse Island and the Linear Park, and some of the aging infrastructure we have in our parks, that was a 50-cent increase to go towards those projects and maintenance of them.
Okay, so thank you for outlining that, but my real question is, how does that relate to the taxes? So we've got this bucket of fees and the taxes, and so we've raised the fees and the taxes. That to me is a tax impact. So the truth in taxation was not transparent. So that's my comment.
Okay. Are you looking for me to respond, or?
Yeah, so.
Okay.
So how can you?
Take 30 seconds to respond for everybody, would you?
Okay. I won't respond necessarily to the transparency issue. This is conducted according to state law, and so that's an issue that can be addressed with the state. But as far as how that relates to each other, it's different buckets of money. So the tax increases for certain items that can only be spent with tax dollars. The utility fees are for items that can only be used for utility items. Those two buckets don't mix. It's almost like two different businesses.
So is there truth in disclosing that information to the public before?
Yes. So we had a hearing with the utility rate increase, just like we're having one right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you, Bonnie. Anyone else like to address the council? Hearing and seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, you've heard from some residents in the city. Let's begin our discussion with Councilwoman Bolduc, and if you'd be brief about where you think we ought to go and just get everyone's opinion on the table, then I'll open that up to just a general discussion.
As you all know, originally I spoke highly against this, and then it became evident about, for instance, we created a problem by having a really popular water park, so forth, passport services, so some of those items have to be covered. So I see value in several of those, despite my struggle with the council wage. Our current wage is less than in 2006, than it was back then. So there is need for changes across the board for holding the tax rate.
Dave, would you like to respond?
So I would love it if we never had to raise taxes, but the reason that we would never have to raise taxes is if there was an ability for us to treat the city more like a business, but this Utah legislature won't allow that. If we were a business and we could have a flat fee that said this is the rate that it's going to be, it could incorporate inflation. But inflation can't be incorporated because the rate goes down every year. What I've seen over my term of office has been that initially really detailed review of the city budget, we find little things that we could clip out of it. But we're now to the point where the things that you're going without are things that the public keeps saying we need. And we keep getting people coming forward with the things that we can't provide. And you saw a very large list of things that we are going without anyway. I asked at the recent tax hearing with the road trip that the legislature's doing, I stayed after and talked to several members of the Senate and the House and asked them why this policy that doesn't allow us to just set a rate and leave it. And they all said, well, you're just going to have to go through this. We know it doesn't account for the money, but you're just going to have to suck it up and face the public with the fact that there isn't enough money. I don't really like this idea, but right now the primary thing, if you look at that $117, $90,000 of it goes to a generator. If we were in a disaster and we didn't have a fully functional police station, police is the number one thing that gets called upon in an emergency, I think we would have some really angry citizens. So to me, it's a no-brainer. We have to at least be prepared, because we can't predict. We could surely kick the can down the road and say, well, we'll roll the dice. It won't happen this year. But that puts us even further behind, because next year the tax rate will go down again. And this list of things that we didn't provide this year will become even longer of the things that we didn't provide. If I believe that the citizens didn't care about this stuff, but I get emails all the time that we want roads fixed, we want police on the street, I don't see any way around it other than to hold the tax rate.
Thank you, Dave. Lisa?
I agree with everything that's been said. There are crucial services that we can't provide for right now, and moving the operations center to more center of town is wise. We tend to hope that we won't ever have worst case scenario, but isn't it a great idea to have that in place when it comes down to it? Also, the east portion of the city is so far away from that area that from the fire station that they are in danger, and that's not a place that we want to be. We also can't kick this down the road. Originally, we talked about not raising this or not sustaining the same taxes, and the idea came down to either we do it now and it doesn't become an enormous raise in a few years, or we wait and then it becomes a large problem and we see a huge hike down the road, and we don't want to have that happen. So for all of the things that were mentioned earlier by other councilmen and women, and the crucial nature of the needs of the city, not wanting to leave us in an emergency situation unprepared, I think that it's wise to sustain our tax rate.
Thank you, Lisa. Jordan?
Yeah, so I'm going to also address something that Dave touched on, is the fact that this system the state has set up is fundamentally flawed in that it does not allow for inflation, and to create a system that does not account for growth is just asking for a problem. So where we are just holding the rate, our intent is not to try and raise the rates to get additional funds. What we're trying to do is just stop losing ground. So holding the rate is just a method to account for the inflation that's occurred over the last few years and be able to buy the same amount of street that we could buy 10 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever that was. The other thing that we've talked about is the Emergency Operations Center. Again, my hope is that that generator never gets turned on. My hope is that emergency center never gets used, and this is a giant waste of money. But in the event that it's not, we will be extremely grateful that this money was spent on an operations center that will be able to meet the needs of the city, a generator that will be able to keep that emergency center up and running. And the thing that Brody said in passing that I actually thought is quite important is the fact that we will be placing a generator on our well. The thing that is immediately apparent in any disaster is if water gets cut off to a city, that is when you get the most issues, because immediately sewers stop flowing. As soon as water stops flowing, sewers stop, which means now you're getting disease, stagnation. You are just inviting so many issues, and this is us ensuring ourselves against a future where if something does happen, this is our best chance at making it through it.
Thank you, Jordan. Doug?
As has been said, I do agree that the state policy for taxation is flawed in relation to how it affects inflation. And there's a big part of me that thinks probably every year we ought to just hold the rate to keep from getting behind. But what I look at is this year, how it affects people, how it affects the city. I look at what is proposed here, and I completely agree with the need for an extra parking. I believe that our splash pad alone is bringing thousands of people to our city every day. I see more people there, and I see more people at the businesses in the town center, and I think to have an employee that can help take care of that as well as other park needs is imperative. With the Emergency Operations Center, which has also been tagged as use of this year's money, I'll be honest, it is not my top priority, but I do think it's important. I think along the same lines as Mr. Perry when he says, is it adequate, what we have now? And it may be, and I don't know if you know this, but it actually has been called into service in the recent past when we had a culinary water issue. We used the Emergency Operations Center. But I also agree with Jordan when he says it's so important to plan for the future. Future we hope never happens, but we need to plan for it. So while it's not my priority for this year's money, I would support that use. So at this point, because of the spelled out uses and we know exactly where we're going to put it and where we need it, I would support holding the rate, or at least if somebody was to propose a partial hold of the rate, I would consider a partial hold to at least get our park employee in place.
Council, I'm now to open it to open discussion amongst yourselves.
I did want to point out one other thing that I think was kind of glossed over. It was mentioned the idea that is the current emergency center adequate? The current emergency center takes care of a generator for the fire department, but let's say that we go into an emergency state. Our current generator that backs up the police station is not adequate. So in the state of an emergency, we want both of those, and as Jordan pointed out, our water to be successful. If we don't have police, fire, and water, we are going to be in a world of hurt. Those are really serious issues for me.
Good.
Anyone else?
My only comment, and the last comment, was that, like I said in our last work meeting, that because this has a lot of things that are necessary, but also the fact that we want to equally take responsibility, that the entire council needs to be on board with this. Yeah. And it sounds like we are, which I am grateful for. I just hate it when there's needs that are needed to be funded, and yet people say, oh, well, I didn't vote for your taxes to go up. Well, none of us want to. That's my point. But we will all take responsibility for it.
Lisa, anything else that you
Nothing.
okay? Council, I would.
Yeah, just one is, so I did mention that I would support a partial hold of the rate. Is there any appetite for that? Obviously, that would involve some discussion about what would be cut out of here.
That is a good question. What items are you discussing?
Well, as I said, the Emergency Operations Center is not a priority for me, at least to do all in 1 year.
But so we're not even going to be able to fund all of it in 1 year.
We're doing just
But
part of
the
it.
generator takes up the most. and
90,000.
How do we go without the generator? If we don't have a generator, then we don't have a fully functioning fire or police station in an emergency. That would scare me.
I agree.
They don't have full resources.
My only thought, and again, I'll support the holding the rate in its entirety, but I just wanted to bring this up. That I think there was $78,000 that we were going to move from capital funds to be able to actually complete this EOC. And if you took $78,000, add another $12,000 to it, you'd have the generator in the first year.
Where was the 78,000 coming from? I don't see that.
It was capital funds.
With the long list of things on the cutting floor, we're behind. No matter, even holding it, we're still a long way behind.
Council, listening to the discussion, I would entertain a motion to call the question.
Okay, motion to call the question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Can you make that by way
I
of,
apologize.
you make a motion?
Oh, you want me to make?
How
You
much?
just asked for a motion to call the question,
Okay, call the question. Now a motion.
but no one seconded it.
Anybody second that?
I second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Now I'm entertaining a motion.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make that motion. I would actually like to recommend that we accept Resolution R1931, setting the certified tax rate as our current rate, holding it to where it is not increasing, just keeping it at the current rate to allow for the inflation, and adopting the final budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Councilwoman Bingham. Any further discussion, council? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Cassie, that stands 5 not. Council, I will call a 10-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene in our regular business meeting. Please try to be back here by 1:15, can you?